Hey everybody, Tom from IGN here to show you how to put new custom backs and casing onto your Joy-Con and Switch. We got these cases from Basetop on Amazon. They've got a wide range of colors. We're going to be putting the white ones onto the Switch. There's already the gold ones you can see here. They've got a whole range, transparent, all that sort of stuff. We're going to be using tools from a set by eDurable, also available on Amazon. This is a set specifically made for taking apart Nintendo things. They've got a special little tri-wing screwdriver that's made just for that. But before we begin, keep in mind that this will almost certainly void your warranty, so proceed with caution, do this at your own risk. Also, it's not so difficult, but it is a little bit tricky in certain spots, especially those tri-wing screws are hard to get off. We actually stripped a screw on one of the Switches we did preparing for this video, and we couldn't get the case off, and we had to get a different Switch for that. So proceed with caution for sure. Make sure you're prepared to do this, but let's get started. We're gonna start by replacing the back of the Switch. We've already got a custom transparent back on ours so you can see things more clearly, and we're using our Switch case as a soft surface so the screen isn't damaged. To start, you'll need to use the tri-wing screwdriver to take out 4 screws, one on each corner of the Switch. These are the tightest screws in this entire process, and you'll need to press very hard and turn slowly to get them started, being very careful not to strip the screw head. Next, there are 6 Phillips head screws around the edge of the Switch to take off. 2 on the bottom, 1 on the top, 1 under the kickstand, and 1 on either end. There are actually 5 identical screws on either end of the Switch, but you only need to take out the middle one. Once all the screws are out, pry the back of the Switch off and set it aside. Now unscrew the single Phillips head screw from the card cover, moving both pieces into the same position on the new case, and screw it back on. Next, unscrew the 2 Phillips head screws on the black part of the kickstand mechanism, then the larger tri-wing screw holding the bar down. Place the mechanism in the same position on the new case, making sure to push the metal bar into position and put the screws back in place. The new kickstand will likely be stiff, and you may need to remove it and sand or file the edges of it down near the top if it doesn't work at all. Now click the new backing onto the Switch and screw it back down, making sure the largest 2 Phillips head screws go on either end and the tiniest goes under the kickstand. Alright, so that was the Switch back. It was pretty simple, just a few screws to take apart. Now we're going to move on to the Joy-Cons. Those are a little more involved, and each one is a little bit different. So I'm going to show you how to do the left one first, and then I'll go through some of the differences with the right one. Starting with the left Joy-Con, unscrew the 4 tri-wing screws from the back corners, similar to the back of the Switch. Use the pry tool to pop the back piece off, but don't pull it too far apart as it's attached with cables. Next, I want to remove the battery by sliding the pry tool under it and twisting until the double stick tape holding it down pops off. Then gently pull the battery cable up and away from the Joy-Con until it unplugs. You'll have to unscrew these 3 Phillips head screws to take out the inner piece, which is also attached with a cable. Now come the tiny bits. With your tweezers, you'll need to disconnect 5 different ribbon cables from the board. To do that, lift the little black or gray flap locking them in, then gently pull the cable out. Set the other case pieces aside along with the L button. Next, unscrew the 2 Phillips head screws holding the joystick in place and remove it. Unscrew 2 more Phillips head screws holding the board onto the front piece of the Joy-Con. Gently pry the white block off its double stick tape and lift it out along with the entire board. From this point on, don't turn the piece upside down or the buttons will fall out. Unscrew the 3 remaining Phillips head screws near the top of the Joy-Con and set that wiring aside as well. Now we need to move the buttons over to the new case. Take off the rubber covers with your tweezers, then pick up the buttons and put them in the corresponding spots. Make sure the notches line up correctly in the holes and that the buttons fall out freely. If they're too tight or don't sit correctly, you may need to sand or file the holes to give the buttons more room. If you're using the colored buttons that come with Basetop's custom Joy-Cons, be sure to put them in the right spots. We actually get the red and the green positions flipped here and had to open it back up and swap them later. Once they're in place, put the rubber covers back on. You'll also want to use tweezers to peel off the black ring around the joystick hole and put it in the new case, lining the 2 little holes in it up with the tiny pegs. Next, screw the wiring over the minus button back in, and then carefully put the board and the white block in place as well, making sure the ribbon cable from the button isn't under the board. Screw the 2 screws back onto the board, but make sure not to tighten them too much or the buttons won't depress, so give the buttons a test at this point. If everything is good, put the joystick back through the hole and screw it back on. Now set the front case piece aside and take the back piece with the track. You'll need to unscrew a single Phillips head screw to remove the track, then move the release button over to the new case, put the track back on, and put the screw in the same position. Finally, we move on to the inner case piece. It may be a little hard to see here, but to get the ZL button off, you need to press the bottom of it down, then pry the top of it up and away from the case. Don't pull it straight up without pressing down, or you could break it. When it pops off, make sure you don't lose the 2 loose springs that are under it. Unscrew the single Phillips head screw holding the wire in place and move it over to the new case, screwing it back down in the same position. Now the hard part. You'll need to put each spring onto a little peg on the case, then line them up with similar pegs on the bottom of the button. Once they're in place, carefully push the button and press it back into place with a motion opposite to taking it out. Now it's time for reassembly. Put the L button back in place, then plug the 5 ribbon cables back into their respective spots, closing the clasps to lock them in. Put the inner case back over the board, making sure the ribbon cable stays under, and screw it back down without over-tightening. Then put the battery back in its spot and use tweezers to plug it back into the board. It's a little tricky, but you should be able to just place it over its spot and push it down to lock it in. Now snap the case together and give the controller a quick test to make sure the buttons feel right. If so, screw the 4 tri-wing screws into the back. Now it's onto the right Joy-Con, which is very similar to the left, but with a few key differences. Undo the back of the case and take out the battery the same as before, but now you'll also need to remove a little black square with a gray wire that sits alongside the battery. Similar to the battery cable, you can just gently pull the wire to disconnect it from the board. To take out the inner case, there are still 3 screws, but now they're in a different position, with 2 on the side by the ZR button. Be careful with the inner piece, as the ribbon cable attaching it is much shorter this time. There are only 4 ribbon cables to detach, and you should start with the one holding the inner piece on. Then do the 2 for the back piece, and finally the blue joystick cable. Take the ZR shoulder button off and remove the joystick the same as you did before. Then undo the 2 screws holding the board to the case. Now you'll need to loosen a few different things that are stuck to the case. Pry the white block off its sticky tape and loosen the IR reader just below it. Then carefully lift the board, which has a flat black piece below it stuck to the case. Use the pry tool to unstick it and then take all of those pieces out, still connected to each other. Move the buttons and black joystick ring over like before, making sure they're all loose in the holes. Once the buttons are in and covered, put the board, along with the flat black piece, IR reader, and white block back into position and screw the board back on without over-tightening. Then it's just like the left Joy-Con, replacing the joystick, swapping the track and release button on the back piece, and the ZR button on the inner piece. Don't forget to put the R button back in place, then reattach all the ribbon cables and screw the inner piece back on over the board, also making sure not to over-tighten. Put the battery back in and connect the cable with tweezers, then put the black square in place and push its wire into the gold connector on the board in a similar manner. Close up the case and give it a test to make sure everything is working, adjusting hole sizes or loosening screws if not. Then screw the 4 tri-wing screws back in and you're done. Alright, we're done. We put the back on the Switch and changed out the Joy-Con casings. I really like the colored buttons on these with the white. It's really nice, and it's not so hard to do. Bit of a fiddly process, but if you've got the right tools and the determination, then it comes together nicely. For everything else Nintendo Switch, stay right here at IGN.